Okay, so hello and welcome to my channel and welcome to the first episode of our 3D design course where we are going to learn Blender and how to model, texture and render and do a lot of interesting stuff in Blender. But today we're not going to talk about Blender at all or 3D design itself from a artistic perspective because we are going to start off with math or mathematical history of 3D dimensional space. Let's start right away. So today we are talking about math. And when we think of mathematics, we usually think of numbers. Or not only numbers, but equations and systems of counting. And of course, the zero. And most of us think of one specific person when we hear the word math. And I'm pretty sure most of you have guessed it's Al-Khwarizmi, the Persian mathematician of the 9th century who formalized algebra, or what we call in English, algebra. Al-Khwarizmi gave the world the concept of zero, the symbol that made modern computation possible. But long before Al-Khwarizmi, the Babylonians, the Babyliyun, built a complex base 60 system, which still survives in how we divide time, like 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and 360 degrees. And since they used to observe the sun when they came up with this base 60 system, it was called the mathematics of the sky. So in the same era as the Babylonians, the Egyptians used a base 10 system, the decimal system that we use every day, which is based on human anatomy, and to be specific, human fingers. We have 10 fingers, so therefore our counting system is based on 10 numbers from 0 to 9. The Mayans worked in base 20 the same way, and today our machines operate in base 2. The binary system, 0 and 1. But before any of these symbolic languages, before even number 1 existed, there was another unit, way older, which is geometry. And geometry wasn't born in a book or a lab or a library, it was seen and observed. So geometry was the first mathematics because it was the first form of understanding. So before anyone could count, people could measure, and before we could calculate, we could see proportion. Geometry was a sacred observation of universe, not only a logical science but also sacred. It wasn't just practical, because to ancient civilizations like the Egyptians, they used proportion to align temples with the star. The Greeks also said that studying geometry was to purify the soul. Plato inscribed on the entrance of his academy, "Let no ignorant of geometry enter here," because to them, geometry was the base of all sciences. Philosophy was too, but geometry was the base of understanding. For them, a shape was not only a structure, it was a code of existence. Let's take a example, the cube. The cube that you find sitting in Blender whenever you open a new file. For most of us, it's useless and most people just delete it, but to Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, the cube represented stability and truth. Every edge was equal, or is equal, every face balanced, and they expressed it mathematically as a perfect equilibrium, x equals y equals z. And that for them was the symbol of wholeness and perfectness. Also we have the circle used to represent infinity, the eternal and the divine. We have here the equation of the circle, which is cube x plus cube not cube, sorry, square. Square x plus y square y equals r square r. I don't know how to read it in English since I studied in French, but this equation translates to every point equal in distance from the center, and that symbolized perfection without beginning or end. So they used it for rituals. They used to do symbols in temples, and they used to worship the meaning behind it. So geometry was not just the study of form, it was the bridge between matter and meaning. But over time, the sacred and the rational began to separate. The Pythagoras and his school, believed numbers had souls and that harmony could describe the cosmos. Then came Euclid, who stripped geometry of myth and rebuilt it with logic. His book became a book of proof and not prayer. And later, René Descartes took geometry off the earth and placed it inside the mind. How? By creating equations and the Cartesian coordinate system, where every point in space could be described by numbers x, y, and z. And this was revolutionary. Space itself became calculable. What was once drawn by hand could now be written as an equation, and the world turned from sacred geometry into analytical geometry, from symbol to system. With Descartes' grid came a new way to move within space. Every position could now be transformed mathematically. So this equation means the new position equals a matrix times the point plus translation. This single formula that you're seeing describes rotation, scaling, movement, and everything that happens inside the 3D world. For example, Blender. It is the equation behind every transformation we make inside Blender. When you rotate a cube, Blender doesn't see it as art. It sees it as linear algebra. A transformation matrix multiplied by coordinate vector, and that was not art, but pure geometry at work. So later came projective geometry, and it was the study of perspective, how 3D space projects onto a 2D surface. It is the reason you can see depth on a flat screen of your PC, the mathematical core of every camera, every viewport, and every render. And we are going to deepen the understanding of projective geometry when we are going to work with cameras. I bought a book about it, so we are going to... It is a physics book. So through projective geometry, light and perception were unified with space. When you render an image, you are reenacting the same logic Renaissance artists discovered, and that the visible world can be reduced to geometric projection. And this is where spirituality was quietly replaced by precision. Is that precision? Précision. So geometry became engineering. Mathematics became computation. But at its heart, it never stopped being philosophy, a way to understand the hidden architecture of existence. Now, every object in Blender, every edge-faced vertex is a descendant of that ancient reasoning, and that's why you are not just learning a software, you're not just learning Blender, you are learning the equation of life itself. So before you learn to model, animate, or texture, understanding what you are really handling is very crucial. And that's why I started it off with math. You are working with space, the most ancient idea humanity ever measured.